Star Wars, Disney, Marvel, all of it. I'm going to focus mostly on Star Wars because that's where my heart really lies. I'm sure you can see by the wallpapers behind me and by the canvases behind me. This is a video I've been wanting to make for a while. I wanted to script it, and that's why I left it for a long time. But then I just thought, no, this isn't something that you script. This is something that you say from your raw, unscripted feelings, at least when you're someone like me. So I just thought I'd go straight into this kind of as just deep as I can. But let's start talking about my problems with Disney, the way they do things, and mostly with Star Wars, alright? So let's think about Episode 7. Now, I was someone who actually quite liked Episode 7. It was a bit on the safe side. We all know that. We don't need to fool ourselves on that. It was obviously a bit on the safe side with that J.J. Abrams just bringing back X-Wings, bringing back Rebels versus Empire in a very weird way. But, you know, it was still felt like Star Wars. It still felt good. Episode 8 hits. Okay, and if you've watched my previous videos about Episode 8, you'll be surprised to hear what I have to say now. Okay, so I still think a lot of the things people say about Episode 8, like plot holes, there are a lot of plot holes, but a lot of the things that people point out to be plot holes just aren't plot holes. Like, that's my thing with Episode 8, is there's a lot of, like, neck-beard hate going on with the film. It's still a bad movie, besides how it looks. It looks great. But it's still a bad movie, but I feel like people don't understand what a plot hole is. Like, they talk about fuel being an issue in Star Wars, whereas in Episode 1, fuel was something that the characters had to take into consideration, for example. So fuel has always been a thing in Star Wars. So, like, that plot hole, for me, was never a plot hole. Also, the bombs that took out the Dreadnought were magnetized, so that's not a plot hole. But my problem with Last Jedi lies somewhere else, okay? It doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie, or it just doesn't. And that's kind of what I had from the beginning when I watched this movie. Like, I wanted to like it so bad when I got out of the theater that I kind of lied to myself. But the truth is, guys, and I remember this feeling clearly, when I got out of that, or rather, when I was sitting in that IMAX theater after watching it for the first time with two of my good friends, I felt really empty. And I convinced myself that was just because I'd already seen Episode 7 and Rogue One, so the whole initial Star Wars hype thing was gone now. But I just felt unbelievably empty at the end of Episode 8, and that feeling has stuck with me more than ever after that movie. And I can't lie to myself about it anymore. I don't like the movie, okay? And yes, the hyperspace scene was good, but it still destroys Star Wars continuity. I mean, The Last Jedi, if we're gonna just take that hyperspace scene, it's literally like eating a cake. Okay, this is gonna be disgusting. A cake made of hair with a delicious chocolate ball inside, but it's poisoned. So that chocolate center kills you 2 days later. That's literally what that hyperspace scene is. And The Last Jedi, I don't like it for so many reasons. It's not just because it craps on Luke's character. I mean, I did like the idea of making him a little bit more hermity and, like, a bit disgruntled, but they took it way too far. They went from, like, what I thought he would be, of being, like, he's still, like, the hopeful Luke, but he needs a bit of nudging, and he's a bit, like, you know, he's a bit, like, tired of it all. That's what I thought they were going to do. What they ended up doing was making him this complete depressed edgelord, which was just like, what the hell? But it's not only the old characters that they, like, did bad with. Okay, it's even the new characters. Like, I don't care what you say about Rey. I liked her in Episode 7. I thought her beating Kylo was fine because, number one, Kylo didn't want to kill her. He wanted to train her. Number two, Kylo took a Wookiee blaster ball to his chest, which we saw early in that film kill 3 stormtroopers from one blast. So, I think Rey winning in that situation, really the Force saving her by creating that big chasm, was fine. Whereas in Episode 8, it's just like her power level skyrocketed up so high with like no training. She did a little bit of saber moving around on Jakku, on the planet that Luke's on, but without even any supervision from Luke. Luke isn't like, okay, hold the saber like this and do that. She's just doing her own thing and Luke's watching her. So Luke didn't even train her, okay? Like, Luke didn't train her in episode 8, and somehow she's more powerful than Master Yoda. If you saw episode 2 and what Master Yoda did to save, for example, Obi-Wan and Anakin. Now take what Rey does with the rocks, and it's like apparently no big deal. It's just like, she just lifts like 50 rocks. Big rocks, and it's okay, you know, that's just normal, I guess, for someone with no training. But episode 7, I was fine with the character. They also they do the service to every character in episode 8. Finn, like, I liked him in episode 7, but he clear issues. In episode 8, I thought that him sacrificing himself to help and save everyone would have been a great end to his character arc, because it would have fixed the one issue his character had, which was not making sacrifices, things like that. And then, of course, Rose Tico, who I thought was going to be a really fun, kind of like nerdy character that you could like kind of connect with, because she'd be a bit awkward and stuff like that. And then she just ends up being one of my least favorite Star Wars characters, even though I liked the concept of her. Like, Rian Johnson just messed up everyone. Poe, too. I mean, sure, maybe Poe was a little bit hasty in the beginning of that film, but if you think about it, because of hyperspace tracking, if Poe didn't take out that dreadnought, then the dreadnought would have tracked on the hyperspace, they wouldn't have been able to do it again, and the dreadnought would have killed them. So Poe single-handedly saved the Resistance, no matter how many casualties there were in that first thing. And the fact that Holdo couldn't realize that, even after the fact, really annoys me. And it makes like sure, the mutiny that Poe did was a bad thing, but it was like very justified. I would have done that in Poe's situation. She either seemed like an incompetent fool or a traitor, you know. So I think it makes a lot of sense what Poe did. But, you know, getting my Last Jedi grievances out of the way, because basically it subverted expectations just to subvert them, not because it made any sense, if we're being honest. Like killing Snoke, ooh, cool, killed Snoke, I guess. And then you think about it and you're like, okay, so, why, how? Well, I kind of get how, but like, Last Jedi grievances, I could go on about that all day. My issues with The Last Jedi aren't most people's stupid issues with The Last Jedi, like cannons arcing in space. It's like, come on. Star Wars has never been accurate to space. There's always been explosions in space. Things have always plummeted to other things in space. There's always been, like, people somehow need thrusters in space, like, constantly during a dogfight. It's always mimicked World War II more than anything else. So the arcing blaster bolts, I'm fine with. Things like that. But, oh my gosh. Okay, so Disney and Star Wars. Let's just think about this for a second. Episode 7 was alright. But it was like, you know, kind of throwaway. I did love the scene where Poe and Finn escape in a TIE fighter. That's my favorite new thing. That's my favorite new scene to come out of any of the new movies. It just felt super character driven, and the music fit perfectly, and the cinematography was amazing. And also, it didn't feel like the stormtroopers were useless in that scene, because yes, they lost, but it was like a surprise attack almost, and they had to fight this heavily armed TIE fighter with like little laser guns, you know, with like little mounted guns that didn't really have much firepower besides infantry, besides infantry uses. So they didn't seem useless, but they still lost for a good reason. So that's my favorite scene from the new Star Wars stuff. And you look at everything that JJ set up, and you look at what he was trying to do. It almost looked like he was trying to build a trio, or at the very least a duo, with Finn and Rey. And yes, Rey needs to go off and do her own thing in episode 8, no doubt. But Finn and Poe made an amazing duo, and the fact that Rian Johnson threw that away, it just seems like this whole thing is just disjointed. Like, maybe J.J. Abrams had an idea for the overall 3 movies, and then Rian Johnson just kind of threw it in the trash. And somehow Kathleen Kennedy is okay with this. We can go on all we want about how Rian Johnson probably made the worst Star Wars movie in existence. Not because of how it looked, not because of dialogue, because the dialogue wasn't awkward, but because of overall story choices. Okay? Like, the dialogue in the prequels is much worse, but the situation surrounding them makes a lot more sense. If that makes sense. Like, it's less cringeworthy in The Last Jedi, like, when you hear them speaking, but, like, what they're speaking about and the way the plot works around that is a lot worse. You know, it really just annoys me because you can see that, like, Kathleen Kennedy just didn't know what she was doing. As I said, we can complain all we want about how much Rian Johnson messed up, but really this is Kathleen Kennedy's fault because she is the one who is supposed to not let these things happen. If there is something wrong, she is supposed to spot it and stop it. And she didn't even realize how much of a monstrosity this movie was going to be. And not in a good way. Not like a monstrosity for the box office. Sure it was, because it was episode 8, the trailer looked good, and no one knew what was going to happen in that theater, you know, from the trailer. Like, no one... I expected a completely different movie considering what happened in the trailer. What happened in the trailer made me expect a completely different movie to what we got, if I'm being honest. So, I don't... Like, this is Kathleen Kennedy's fault. Like, sure, Rian Johnson wrote and directed. Number one, he shouldn't have been the only one writing and directing for not even a full 2 years to work on this movie. Think about it. It was 2 years of writing and then acting. Only 2 years. The original trilogy, and as far as I'm aware, the prequel trilogy took around 2.5 to 3 years each time to bring out the next movie. These ones take just about 2 years, but a little bit under, usually. And to try and make a quality movie out of that amount of time just isn't possible. Like, yes, you can make it look pretty. Yes, you can have a cool action scene. They definitely achieve that every time. But to make a proper, quality, memorable, classic Star Wars movie, you can't do that in 2 years. Especially when you have two different teams working on two different movies at the same time. It's like one movie comes out each year. You know what I'm saying? Like, sure, it's 2 years between episode 7 and episode 8, but then another Star Wars movie comes in between that. So even then, they're splitting resources and allocating things, and then you can't even have a full team working on the one Star Wars movie that comes out 2 years later instead of 3 years later, and you have one Star Wars movie every year, and it begins to feel like this really uninspired conveyor belt. Now, that leads me to talk about Marvel. Now, okay, so the thing about Marvel is they're handling the movies a lot better than Star Wars is handling theirs. But I think that's easily because Marvel is kind of mimicking comics. Granted, they're mimicking the comics, but also changing them and twisting them for modern time and changing some of the plot points. But for example, the whole Thanos Infinity War thing, that was in the comics already. So they just had to adapt that for the silver screen. And granted, they're doing a great job with that. That they're really they're basically doing exactly what the fans would want. Fans of Marvel, I would say. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of what they're doing because it feels so predictable and conveyable. Even Infinity War, to me, was kind of predictable. It's like, yeah, they're all, like, half of them are going to die, and then in the next movie, they're probably going to exchange their souls for the other ones, because, I mean, when you, like, you know, Robert Downey Jr. and all of them, their contracts are running out, and then the new Avengers is going to be like Bucky Barnes and Spider-Man, all those people. I think that's pretty predictable, but at the end of the day, Infinity War, all these other movies are a lot more solid than the Star Wars movies, which just pains me to say. Like, I want Marvel to do well, and they are, despite how conveyor belt and just, like, predictable the movies are compared to when, like, say, the first Iron Man came out and stuff like that. But I want Star Wars to be good too. And Disney owning Star Wars is the worst thing, because the best thing about Star Wars was, like, a new trilogy, like, every 10 years. Not like one movie now. What? Like, we've had literally Star Wars Episode 7, Star Wars Rogue One, Star Wars Episode 8, Star Wars Solo. That's already 4 movies. That's more than the trilogy. And it's been year. It's not been year, and then 3 years wait, and then another 3. It's literally year. We've already had 4 Star Wars movies. Where, if it was under George Lucas's hands, we'd probably have only had about 2 by now. You know what I'm saying? And you can tell the quality has degraded. Not necessarily cinematography-wise, not necessarily VFX-wise. VFX-wise, it's gotten 1,000 times better, obviously. But, like, story-wise, These movies are things that you watch in the theater, you really love them at first, and the more you dwell on them, they just feel worse. Now that's the opposite with the prequels, because the prequels, when you first watch them, at least as you get older, I didn't notice the bad dialogue as a kid. The prequels, when you watch them as an older person, they kind of make you cringe. But the more you watch them, the more you see all the amazing visual poetry and just the great world building that you can look past some of the dialogue cringe. For example, that shot of Padme screaming in pain as she's giving birth, and then switching to Anakin from the same shot view, on the table getting operated on to become Darth Vader, right? And it's stuff like that that's just super amazing when it comes to the prequels and even the original trilogy, because the original trilogy had moments like that too. But when you look at The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens, they don't have moments like that. They just don't. And the one thing is also just the music is so uninspired now. Sure, for example, Solo: A Star Wars Story, that Reminiscence Therapy song that came out, it's great, cool. I get a revamped version of that Empire Strikes Back asteroid scene in terms of the music. But as cool as that is to listen to, it's nothing new, and it really just becomes novelty. Even Star Wars Episode 7, Star Wars Episode 8, as much as I liked some of the new themes, I really had to realize that they were just recycles or revamps or changes of what we've already heard. Now, as much as you might hate the prequels, I like them, but if you hate them, just listen to the music of the prequels on their own. It's breathtakingly amazing, the prequels music. It still feels like Star Wars, but it's very new and unique. Whereas this new Star Wars music just feels like original trilogy 2.0. It feels like if John Williams was going to make a bunch of new scores that paid homage to the original trilogy for some one-off orchestra show. That's what it feels like. It doesn't feel like music for a new trilogy of movies, or at least a new original version. Star Wars just does not feel as special anymore. And don't get me wrong, I could have still loved this trilogy if we went from Episode 7 and got a little bit better from there, because Episode 7 was still a solid entry. But then Episode 8 happens. Now, even though J.J. Abrams is back, what's he going to do? What's he going to do to fix all these things that happen, like Luke dying? I'm sorry. Rian Johnson can just stick it so far up his ass because he was like, oh, I think that Luke's character has done everything he can do in Star Wars now. His character arc is over. I get to decide it because I'm Rian Johnson and I'm making my first ever Star Wars movie. And you're like, okay, think about this. Rey hasn't had any training yet. None. Maybe you and Luke have talked about some stuff, but Rey hasn't had any training yet. Kylo's still out there. And also in that last fight between Luke and Kylo, he literally gives up on him. Kylo's like, are you here to save my soul? And Luke is just like, no. And you're like, okay, great. I guess Luke doesn't care anymore. Great. Awesome. Thanks. And then, what the hell? It's just so stupid. It's just so stupid. It's so irreversibly dumb. What are they going to do? Luke dies, apparently because this is the end of his character arc. There's nothing more he can do, according to Rian Johnson, when he could be assisting the Resistance a lot, considering how small they are. He could be training Rey. He could be trying to get Kylo back onto the good side. But no, he's, apparently, according to Rian Johnson, he has nothing useful to add. Apparently, his character arc is over. How is his character arc over? Imagine how much more his character arc could be developed if Rey became like a granddaughter figure for him. Imagine how much his character could develop just from that alone. Obviously not biological, but he could feel like he's being a good grandparent or parent sort of figure to Rey, and that could develop his character immensely. But obviously Rian Johnson didn't think of that because he had less than a year to write the bloody movie, or just over a year. Now, I know this video is long, but it's going to be rough, mostly uncut. I'm trying to cover a lot here. There's a lot of thoughts that I have about Kathleen Kennedy and her whistleblowers, okay? A lot of thoughts. And now, I want to switch rapidly here to the man, the legend, Mr. Dave Filoni. my dudes. Dave Filoni, okay, he is basically the better George Lucas. You might scoff at that. You might go, how can you say that about George Lucas? Now, the only reason is because George mentored him for about 5 damn years on how to make good Star Wars stories and what the lore was all about, and because Dave Filoni was a mega fan before even getting involved in Star Wars. That's why, right? But Dave Filoni is just George Lucas 2.0 because not only was he mentored by George Lucas on how the universe worked, on how things should happen, on what makes a good Star Wars story. 5 years, that's a lot of time. Especially when it's your day job every day, right? To be learning from George Lucas. Not only did that happen, Dave Filoni just happens to be a better writer than George Lucas, in my opinion. And when it comes to dialogue, things like that, Dave Filoni is just better at that sort of stuff. Like, there were a lot of behind the scenes with the Clone Wars TV series that I watched where Dave Filoni was just arguing with George, like, day in and day out, like, about how things should change. And when George finally gave in to those new ideas from Dave, like, this series got so much better. Like, so much better. As soon as, like, George started listening to Dave Filoni a little bit more, at least that's the impression I got from the behind the scenes stuff. Like, the fact that Dave Filoni, that they're just segmenting him to only be working on animated TV series is kind of an insult to where he is. Because sure, if George Lucas still owned the property of Lucasfilm and of Star Wars and all that, then sure, Dave Filoni could be sidelined a bit to being onto only the animated series. But I'm sorry, when he is your most knowledgeable person in terms of the Star Wars universe, and not only that, like, sure, he's not just this mega nerd who knows a lot about Star Wars, when he's your most knowledgeable person about Star Wars, and he is probably the best Star Wars director that any of them could ever hope for. He's probably the best Star Wars writer that any of them could ever hope for with George Lucas being gone. The fact that they sideline him to the animated shows really, really, really pisses me off. Now, maybe he shouldn't direct the films directly. Like, that's fine. JJ can direct all 3. I'm fine with that. And Gareth Edwards, or whatever his name is, can do Rogue One. And all those other people, Ron Howard can do Solo. Or they really think they should have stuck with was it the Coen brothers or the Russo brothers? I can't remember. They really should have stuck with them. But Dave Filoni should be the creative director of all of the new Star Wars things. Everything should have to go past him first. Now, Kathleen Kennedy can stay and manage the money and the resources and everything. That's fine, because that is what she is good at. She is a producer. That is what she knows best. I'm not trying to slate Kathleen Kennedy on any of that. She's a very intelligent woman when it comes to moving money and allocating resources and managing things. Okay, she's very smart at that. But when it comes to being a creative director for Star Wars and green lighting projects based on their based on their story prospects and things, she is just terrible at that. She is actually just appalling. And that's not me trying to say Kathleen Kennedy is the devil of Star Wars. She's not, okay? Maybe she has a bit of a feminist agenda, and I'm fine with first and second wave feminism. But when you go so radical as to wear t-shirts that say, the Force is female, I'd have you know the Force is genderless. It's a thing that binds all living beings, and it doesn't discriminate, bitch. When you wear a t-shirt like that, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure, especially because as much as I want Star Wars to appeal to like young girls and like to, just to a woman demographic in general, the fact is that most Star Wars fans are men. Now, that most demographic is probably like a 60% man, 40% woman. I haven't checked it, but just from my life experiences, I know that roughly the same amount of men that like Star Wars, roughly the same amount of women like Star Wars, but just a little bit more is the men. So I'd say about 60, 40, or 55, 45. I hope that math was correct. I don't even know. But the difference is very small, but it's there. Men is the majority, and I'm fine with women heroes. I really, really am. But when you just make the woman, you try to make them all empowering and stuff, but they really come off as just bossy and stupid, and then you take the men and you make them all bumbling idiots. Who does that appeal to at this point? Like, I have friends that are women that are like, after episode 8 at least, because episode 7, I loved Rey's character in episode 7. After episode 8, it's just like, Holdo, what the hell was that? Rose, what the hell was that? Rey, what the hell was that? And then they'll move on to the guys, and they'll be like, Luke, what the hell was that? You know what I'm saying? And also, Kathleen Kennedy says young girls can't relate with Luke Skywalker, and I'm sorry, that's such bullshit. Okay, that is such bullshit. You can relate to characters no matter what their damn gender. I related to Rey. I related to Rey in episode 7 a lot. I don't relate to her in episode 8 anymore because she's basically like a do everything without knowing anything. But yeah, I mean, you know what I'm trying to say here. It's just so mind-bogglingly stupid. Anyway, I've been talking a lot about this. You know what I'm trying to say here, really. I think that the people managing Star Wars right now really need to change what they're doing. They need to change their attitude. Star Wars is not a conveyor belt thing. Now, don't get me wrong. I'd be fine with kind of like for 10 years a conveyor belt of anthology films. But you cannot water down a trilogy of Star Wars movies, a mainline trilogy, so much that they come out barely 2 years after each other, with anthologies in the middle, segmenting and like kind of, you know, wasting resources where they don't need to be allocated, and then you can't even make a good trilogy movie. And that is really showing. Political or not, people are just starting to realize that these movies kind of suck. Well, not that these movies, okay, that episode 8 really sucks. That Rogue One is a good time, I guess. That Solo is kind of an average time, I guess. Episode 7 is also a good time. But that, in general, none of these movies are anything special. Like, none of them. Solo, I will say Solo, the first 30 minutes of Solo was some of my favorite Star Wars ever. Unfortunately, it went about as downhill as a paraplegic in a wheelchair after that, but his first 30 minutes of Solo were glorious, in my opinion, and then it just kind of went downhill from there. But yeah, and the one thing I would say to Disney, or maybe to Kathleen Kennedy specifically, because I don't think it's Disney limiting anything here. I really think it's Kathleen Kennedy not knowing what she's doing with the Star Wars franchise, creatively at least. You don't need to focus so much on Rebel storylines. That's not what makes Star Wars Star Wars. I mean, look at the Clone Wars TV series. People love that, and Rebels are nowhere to be found. For example, in the Solo movie, this was meant to be a movie about the underworld, you know, the underground of Star Wars, you know, the criminal underworld. But then, like 3/4 of the way through the movie, Enfys Nest, guess what they are? They're the start of the Rebel Alliance. And you're just like, can we just have one new movie where the Rebels don't factor in at all? That's what I was hoping with Solo. No mention of Rebels. Of course, there's going to be mention of Empire because it's that time period where they're taking over everything. But no mention of Rebels, just criminal underworld, good Star Wars goodness. Please, we don't need to shove a Rebel a Rebel storyline into every single little thing. And treating stormtroopers or treating the other side like they're completely inhumane just annoys me so much. It really, really does. And yes, the First Order are kind of like Nazis a bit. Granted, they chose to make them that way. The stormtroopers were never as bad as the First Order is in terms of morals. Like, yes, the stormtroopers are bad. Don't get me wrong. The Empire is bad. I don't like them. Their morals are kind of screwed up. But also, you have to take into account people's upbringings. Like, if you grew up in one of the wealthier Empire, like, controlled planets, you're probably going to side with them. You know what I'm saying? And it's that lack of gray area. It's that lack of treating them like actual people that annoys me. And, like, you can say the original trilogy didn't do that, but I think they did it. I think they did. To a degree, okay? They would make fun of stormtroopers and stuff, but think about Rey for a second. Think about her. She had almost no First Order influence. They weren't really, like, oppressing her on Jakku or anything, okay? Like, when you watch Episode 7, she seems almost oblivious to what the hell the First Order is. Like, she seems like she has a basic idea, but that she didn't really grow up with them oppressing her or anything. Like, because, you know, she just didn't, whatever. And then we switch to the scene in Episode 8 where she's just blowing them up. And, oh, it's basically like a video game to her. She's like, I like this. Yeah, I'm killing people. Woo! And then you go, let's compare that to Luke in episode 4.
You're too fast! I got him!
Luke did that in episode 4 too. Now look at the minor dialogue differences and look at the minor way that they're getting excited. It's different. It's slightly different. But also, think about this. Rey didn't grow up with the First Order oppressing her. So she's not really fighting back against something that has always been a part of her life in a negative way. Whereas, you can see that the Empire was always affecting Luke's life in a negative way. And when he fought those TIE fighters in that turret cannon, it was the first time he fought his lifelong oppressor. So of course he's going to be happy and excited. But he didn't seem to be happy and excited in such like this is like a video game kind of way. Whereas Rey was like, oh yeah, I'm just shooting these mindless things. That's what it seemed like to me. That's the big difference between, like, it felt like the writing in the older movies was just so much more well-rounded and humane. Whereas in this, it's just like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just like, everything is so base level. Like, it's like, okay, you can't really blame J.J. Abrams for that, because he was trying to bring more humanity to the First Order. Especially, you have to remember, the First Order troopers are taken as children and indoctrinated. They basically put software in their brains as children. And now Rey is going to go around and shoot them, all smiles, as if they are completely as if they are completely to blame for their life choices, when you have to remember that they were indoctrinated from birth, taken as children, like implanted with shit, and then apparently, oh, it's fine to just, like, I'm not saying the rebels shouldn't, or the resistance shouldn't fight them. Of course they should fight them. They're trying to take out planets and shit, but they shouldn't fight them in such a way that's like, oh yeah, this is so fun, woo! And I'm fine with, like, maybe Poe Dameron taking down, like, a couple X-Wings and be like, yeah, we're fighting back. Like, yeah. But then there's a difference when Rey is, like, in this turret and going, like, just blasting them without any effort and just going, like, oh, yeah, this is so fun. Woo! I really like this. I really like this. Like, that's, like, that, especially that line where she's like, I like this, was just, like, a bit too disconnected for me. I could go on all day. This video is about to be like 40 minutes. I bet it's about to be like 40 minutes, and that needs to not. I really hope I'm not wasting my time making this video, but it's just something I needed to get off my chest. Especially since Poe, Finn, and Rey seem like really original characters in the beginning of this entire thing, of this new Star Wars trilogy, and then things just went to shit. Because of Rian Johnson, because of Kathleen Kennedy, because of jumping the gun, because of wanting to just milk the money out of this thing until it's a dry Star Wars cow, an anorexic Star Wars cow. I really can't. Like, I have a Star Wars The Last Jedi t-shirt from when the movie first came out, and I was still trying to like it, so people didn't know really how empty it felt. And it just sits there in my cupboard. I'm never wearing it again. I'm never wearing it again. I can't. Like, it's no offense to the people who bought me that shirt, but I just can't bring myself to wear it. I know this sounds so melodramatic, but what you have to understand for me is that Star Wars was something that was super special to me. Grew up with it as a kid, and it got me through some really tough times in school. Like in primary school. High school for me was a much nicer experience. Weirdly, because it's usually the other way around for people, but high school is where I kind of came in my own. But anyway, with primary school, Star Wars was really a coping mechanism for me. And the only reason it could be that is because of how well thought out the world was, how well thought out the characters were, how relatable they were, because they had very believable struggles in this super fantastical world. Whereas it's almost like, yes, in these new movies, they're fighting a First Order, but they're not humans with actual struggles and problems. They were in Episode 7, but not in Episode 8. And that's why it breaks my heart so much, because it's like, I don't know. It just feels so superficial as compared to what it used to be. You know, sure, George made a crap ton of money off of these movies, but you could tell how much passion he had. You know? Hell, you can tell how much passion J.J. Abrams had, even if a little misguided. It really felt like Rian Johnson just wanted to make his own Star Wars movie because fuck it. Really. And Kathleen Kennedy, as much as she says, oh, she cares so much about Star Wars, I'm sorry, when you ever watch an interview where people ask her Star Wars related questions, she will never go in depth. She'll always give the generic Star Wars appeals to everybody. You can tell she doesn't give two little bird shits about Star Wars. Not even two little bird shits. Dave Filoni needs to replace her. And honestly, the fact that Disney is taking over everything these days is a little bit scary. They're buying 20th Century Fox. They obviously own Marvel. And now the Marvel Netflix TV series are mysteriously getting cancelled. Like hell, Netflix hasn't even brought out a statement as to why they're being cancelled. They're just being cancelled after Daredevil 3 being one of the best things to come out of a TV series in a long, long time. Like one of the best TV series seasons in a long time, Daredevil Season 3, and it just mysteriously gets cancelled because Disney's starting their own streaming service. Disney owns almost everything now when it comes to the entertainment industry. They're basically building monopoly, and if things don't change, it's not gonna be too long before they own literally every big blockbuster property, which is just a disgusting thought in my mind. One company owning, let's just say they already have Marvel, Star Wars. Let's say one company owning Marvel, Star Wars, DC. I don't know what else. There's a lot of other shit, but like Star Trek, which they might already own actually. If they own all that shit and more, what's gonna happen? Just think about that. That's a nightmare world if you love movies. And think about what they did with LucasArts, like the game studio, right? Instead of buying them and stopping them from bankruptcy and allowing their games that were all nearly finished to be published, like Star Wars First Assault, Star Wars Battlefront 3, all those Star Wars The Force Unleashed, all those amazing games that they were working on. Instead of buying that, which they could have easily done because they bought Lucasfilm and Disney makes tons of money. Instead of buying that, what they end up doing is they just let LucasArts die, let all those amazing projects that we saw from leaked footage just completely die, and then they give exclusive rights to EA, one of the most hated gaming companies today, to make Star Wars games. And look how that's turned out. Star Wars Battlefront 1 was okay. Star Wars Battlefront 2 was a lot better, but stupid microtransactions and just disgusting things in there. Policy-wise and just like, ethics-wise. Guys, I have talked a lot about this. I really hope this can just be a master video in terms of being like therapy for fellow Star Wars fans and fellow just lovers of movies and entertainment in general, because as much as this might seem like a rant on Star Wars specifically, it's also a rant on Disney. But Kathleen Kennedy, Disney need to realize Rebels doesn't make Star Wars, Empire doesn't make Star Wars. New characters in this massive playground of Star Wars. Star Wars is a massive playground, and Disney and Kathleen Kennedy are deciding to stay in the sandbox but make the sand a little bit more wet. And that's my big problem with them. They need to realize that that's not how you make a new Star Wars story. They need to realize that they need to stop alienating their fans, their main fan base. They need to slow down a bit. They need to allow other studios to make games. And they really need to carefully think about things before they greenlight them, like Rian Johnson, like that hyperspace scene, and just everything. As cool as it looked, it ends up being kind of continuity breaking, and then there was just other completely worse things in there. Yeah. So guys, I guess that's going to be the end of this super long video. I mean, holy crap. I really hope this doesn't bore the shit out of people. I am going to put footage over it so that it doesn't bore the crap out of you. But I wanted to make this big master video because I am going away for like 11 days, so you won't see another video from me in a while. And yeah, I really hope that this long form video was something you enjoyed. If you want to see more long form videos like this, which I could honestly make for other things, but maybe in a more positive light, please let me know. This is a new experiment for me to just go super uncut and to just let my raw thoughts go out, and almost like a podcast format, but just me, and just for like a long ass time and videoed. So if you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments. This has been the Randy Andy Show. Yeah, and I'll see you in the next video. So I'm just feeling a little bit depressed after talking about all of that, man. But I will see you in the next video.